Hello, Kevin here. As we have been talking about different types of law within the U.S., and one of those being administrative law. So today I will be doing my presentation on a administrative agency, specifically the National Park Service, as well as like the goal of the agency. So with that being said, let's get started. So first up, we have is the goal of the National Park Service, which is to preserve unimpaired the natural and cultural resources and the values of the national park system for the enjoyment, education, and inspiration of this and future generations. Next up, we have the jurisdiction of the National Park Service. So the NPS is a reg- regulatory agency within the United States federal government that derives its power from the Department of Interior and specifically has control all over all areas designated part of the National Park Service as well as other federal and state lands. In addition to this, some of the employees have different jurisdiction in which they can control. So you have type 1 employees, so those include like law enforcement rangers and park police. And they really have power with outside the parks, like if someone's breaking the law within it, they can sort of go in there. And then under that you have like type 2 employees, and they're really only seasonal law enforcement rangers. So they're going to be primarily, like as you think of a park ranger, really helping individuals and promoting nature and like fair use of all that for different individuals. So, along with the jurisdiction of the NPS comes their primary working locations. So that's going to include federal areas known as national parks, monuments as reservations, along with certain states allow the NPS to work within them. So really, this is going to include your national parks like Yellowstone and the Grand Canyon, along with national monuments, maybe like the Lincoln Memorial or like Mount Rushmore. It's in the picture. Now that you know where you'll be working with the NPS, you may be wondering, how do I get a job? So I'm going to really go over the two more administrative jobs within the NPS. So first up, we have the law enforcement ranger. So they tend to work, more within the parks, promoting the like community aspect with it, promoting good use of the culture and natural resources within the area. So to become a law enforcement ranger, you first have to pass the different securities. So that's going to be being a U.S. citizen, being over 21, having a driver's license, all of those more general job requirements. Along with that, you have to pass the PEB fitness test. So that's going to be like a different series like push ups, sit ups, running, that kind of stuff. And then if you specifically want to be a ranger dealing with law, you also have to have law enforcement training. So that could be like policing school or maybe experience in like a different law, like a police agency or something prior. And then if you want to be something like a cultural ranger, along with that, you have to have a 4-year degree within your respective field. Now, along with that, we have the U.S. Parks Police Officer. That's going to be more your general enforcing of the law and regulations, like within the park or like protecting the monument. So that again has the minimum requirements of being a citizen, passing a fitness test. But in addition, there's also a written exam to see what will be a good job for you within the park police that you have to pass. Now, along with this, you have to pass a background test and have a medical review. You also need to either have a 2-year degree in policing or 60 credits in college for policing. They do also take prior experience of 2 years in police work. So, along with law enforcement within the NPS, there are other careers that are more about studying and promoting use of the natural resources. So, for example, first up, we have like a forestry technician, and that's essentially a wildfire fighter. So, as you can guess, your job is to fight wildfires and also make sure all the forest and all that is in good harmony. This job, most of these tend to be 1 year or less, and they're open to the public or those within career transfer from like the military or other government agency. Next up, we have an archaeological technician. As you can guess, you're going to be digging like an archaeologist, studying different resources, maybe like fossils within the parks. And last, we have like a biological science technician, and you're really going to study like different animals and how they interact within the parks themselves. So now that you know some different types of jobs you can get within the NPS, you may be wondering, what are my odds of getting a job? Well, first off, the NPS has its national headquarters within Washington, D.C., along with all the other different administrative agencies. There's also 7 regional offices, so as you can see on screen, there's a map of the different regions along with their headquarters that they really regulate and promote within their area. Then on top of that, there's 419 areas that are considered part of the National Park Service, whether that be parks or monuments. Specifically, 61 of those are about national parks, and the NPS hires about 20,000 employees along with 300,000 volunteers, so you have a pretty good chance of being hired. Whether maybe if you can't be an actual employee, you can gain experience volunteering for future employment within the NPS. Finally, you may be wondering, what are some recent events that's happening in the NPS? Like, this sounds really interesting, so I want to know what's happening. Well, first up, on July 4th, 2019, as part of the 4th of July celebration, President Trump had the Salute to America celebration in Washington, D.C., which included, flyovers of the military tanks, a national speech that Trump himself spoke at. Well, as this is considered a national monument, there were $2.5 million that was redirected from other projects, that he was promoting, like reconstruction within the parks or building new shelters and all that. It's redirected to this Salute to America. It's considered pretty controversial, though it was considered successful. And finally, on July 6th, 2019, there was a park ranger, a law enforcement ranger in Hawaii, at one of the volcano parks. Essentially what happened is that he was doing a stop of a vehicle to basically, inspect it and make sure it belonged to the right owner when he found out that the vehicle was stolen, right? So the guy took off, and to try to stop him, the law enforcement ranger essentially had to shoot at him. The criminal, the only injury he suffered was being shot in the hand, as long as some glaze marks in the vehicle. The criminal was eventually arrested, and the ranger was put on leave for further inspection. So, with all of that, I would like to thank you for watching this presentation on the National Park Service. Hope you learned something and you enjoy your day. Thank you.